Hello, and welcome to a hybrid webinar on the topic Utility Scale Solar, a Revolution in Progress. I'm Tom Rod, and I'm speaking to you from the Media Innovation Center at West Virginia University in Morgantown. We're going to take just a minute to let people log in online, and then we'll start with our program speakers. While we're waiting, and while folks are joining us, this program is organized by the West Virginia Center on Climate Change, which is based here in Morgantown. We've been organizing educational programs about global warming and climate crisis since 2013, and we started our first online webinars in 2020. This is our second hybrid webinar, which combines an in-person and an online audience and speakers. It's an exciting new format for us. You folks online may have some control over what you see by toggling between the speaker and the gallery view. Our next hybrid webinar will be on Wednesday, July 27th. The topic will be Blue is the New Green. Labor unions tackle the climate crisis. You can learn more and register at our website, wvclimate.org. So I say welcome to everybody who's joining as a member of our online audience here in Morgantown, and also to everybody, it's the live audience here in Morgantown, and also to everyone who's joining us online. Now I'm going to step back to my table back here to introduce today's three speakers. Okay so far? I want to introduce today's three speakers. Our main speaker is David Feldman, who is joining us online, and our panelists are Betsy Arlen, who's also online, and here with me in Morgantown is our third panelist, Danny Chiotos. David Feldman will speak for about 15 minutes, and then Betsy and David for about 5 minutes each, and after that we will address audience questions. People in the audience, you can submit questions online in the Q&A section, or folks here in Morgantown can write them out on a piece of paper. I'll review them and present as many as I can to the speakers, and I'll say more about Betsy and Danny after David Feldman's initial presentation. Betsy, you can switch off your camera now and mute if you like. Say something about David Feldman. Very glad to have him here. He's a senior analyst at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. We were just delighted to recruit him because he's a leading national expert on utility scale solar electricity. His publications at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, they include topics, here are just the titles of some of them: emerging opportunities in financing solar, the role of advancement in solar photovoltaic efficiency, reliability, and costs, the winter 2021-22 solar industry update, and toward decarbonization, establishing a sustainable, equitable, and diverse workforce in the U.S. photovoltaic industry. He is a member of the Washington, D.C. office of the NREL's Strategic Energy Analysis Center. He earned an MBA from the Yale School of Management and a BA from Amherst College. David, welcome to our webinar program, and I'll turn the floor over to you for 15 minutes of your initial remarks. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak. I have a few slides I'm going to go through and on some suggested topics, but feel free to ask any questions throughout if there's anything that's confusing, and I will try and keep us on time and going. So just a little background about the solar system and what it is and its advantages for those who might not be as familiar. So photovoltaic or PV systems are made up of varying amounts of modules. So it could be 2 modules for the a house, or millions of modules. They absorb sunlight, which creates an electrical charge that causes electricity to flow. And they produce direct current power. So they're almost always connected to an inverter because which converts the DC energy into DC power to AC power, which is used as much of the electric grid and used in your home and things like that. They can produce energy from direct or indirect light, but they produce the most energy when they're sort of the light is directly facing them. So most mounting structures have the panels face south because that's sort of where the sun the path of the sun follows in the northern hemisphere, and oftentimes, particularly for utility scale, most utility scale systems have tracking systems so that the panel rotates to sort of face the sun throughout the day. Ideally, there are different kinds of tracking systems: 1-axis, 2-axis, but for economic 2-axis is more accurate as far as, but for economic reasons, virtually all of large-scale systems use 1-axis tracking systems. So they're different from virtually all other electric generation technologies. There's really no moving parts other than like the trackers, and often the inverter will have a cooling fan. But other than that, there's really no moving parts, and there's no fuel, right? No purchase fuel other than the sun. So that the cause of those things is it creates relatively low operating costs and relatively predictable pricing and electricity production. They're also modular, so they can be deployed in a wide range of scales. So even utility scale projects, could have varying degrees from hundreds of megawatts to just a few. To obviously residential systems are much smaller than that as well. Like I said, you can generate electricity either directly or indirectly from the light. So there's a broad geographical applications because of that ability. And if we look at the U.S. compared globally, it's considered, most of the U.S. is considered very good or really good solar resource levels, and you can see that in the bottom left. Obviously, the Southwest is really good, but even the Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, West Virginia is pretty good compared to other parts of the world. And you can see on the right sort of the amount of electricity the U.S. generates from solar, and you can see sort of it going up over time because there's just more and more solar. But you can also see that about the PV generates about twice as much electricity sort of at its peak, in like May or whatever, than sort of at the nadir of like January, December. But sort of we know that, right? That's not a surprise. And if we think about the future, if you look to the left, you can see that the price of electricity over the past 10 years, the price of electricity over the past 10 years has come down. Price of solar PV system has come down to a lot, but this is a projection from NREL of sort of what the next 30 years holds. There's expected to be continued decrease in the price of PV systems and the electricity that they generate, and that's for a variety of reasons. One, the PV modules are projected to continue to generate more electricity per square meter. So the efficiency, the amount of sunlight that it captures and turns into electricity is projected to keep on increasing. And there's scientists working on things that make the module more efficient, and that and cheaper, and that not only makes it better for the module, and cheaper to produce the module, but it also means less labor on a per electricity generated as well, because sort of if you have a panel that produces that much more electricity, then, and the labor, it's still the same amount of labor to put that in, but you're effectively putting in more power by having a more efficient panel. And it also means you have less mounting structure per unit of power as well, and less land costs. So all these things sort of help drive down costs by just the efficiency. There's also other things like bifacial modules, so that's becoming a lot more prevalent in the marketplace. So talked about the sun shining down and producing electricity. Well, it turns out that a lot of PV cells, which the cells are the things inside the module, can actually produce electricity whether the light shines on the front or the back. And if you have reflective, most things reflect, but light generally bounces off the ground and can hit that and can generate not twice as much electricity, but some, and every bit matters. And certainly you can do things to improve the amount of light that's hitting the panel as well. There's also panels are getting bigger, so that makes installation quicker and cheaper just by sort of efficiencies at scale. Inverters are becoming more efficient, converting more electricity from the DC to AC. And then there's just a lot of more data, more big data automation that's making it cheaper to build these systems. They're getting better quality from all that data, and they're operating more efficiently and having less downtime. And then just the PV supply chain, just globally and in the US, is just getting bigger, and that just allows costs to be driven down as well. So there's a lot of reason to be bullish on the price of electricity in the long term. Obviously, there are things that inflation that's happening in short term, and there are all these things happening within the solar sector as well in the short term that would causing prices to increase. But sort of long term trends, technology, there's reason to believe to be bullish for PV. Globally, most of the solar is installed in a few countries. So China, US, Europe, India, Japan, that's most of where PV is being deployed globally. And that's through strong policies from these countries, some strong federal policies. And, it's a little bit different. The US, Japan, and Europe are really working to replace what they already have as far as electricity generation. Places like China, India, they don't have the infrastructure. They're building it. They're electrifying places. They're providing more electricity. So they're really building up things that they sort of a new system. Turning towards the US, you can see that over the past 10, 11 years, significantly more solar is being deployed. That's the sort of orange pieces. And more of the electricity generation technologies, wind, natural gas, coal, nuclear, all these things. It's more and more of the new stuff is solar and wind. So that's sort of a big trend. And if we look, sort of big picture, solar still is a relatively small part of the total generation mix. So if you look, natural gas is really the biggest piece, but from a amount of generation, about 4% of electricity generated in the US last year came from solar. Now that's low, and that's nationally, but if you look at certain states, they've actually gotten a lot more than 4%. So there are 11 states where more than 6% of their electricity came from solar, and California leads the way with about a quarter of their electricity they generated last year came from solar. And the type of solar that gets generated sort of depends. So if you look at a place like Nevada or North Carolina, most of that is big utility scale projects. For a place like New Jersey, more distributed places, or Hawaii, it's more smaller scale things. In California, it's a good mix. So there's also a mix of sort of what type of PV systems, right? So where they're located. So you can see the majority of PV systems nationally are these utility scale systems. Although there's still a decent amount of other, but utility scale is the biggest market segment. And then there are, the leading markets. So if you look at leading three markets last year, Texas, Florida, California, they were about half of what was deployed last year. But, having said that, there's a growing diversification of where solar is getting deployed. So 19 states have more than 1 gigawatt of cumulative PV installations at the end of 2021, with New Mexico and Illinois just achieving that feat in 2021. And 25 states installed more than 100 megawatts alone in 2021 alone. So a lot of markets out there, a lot of things happening, even though the big states are really where a lot of the panels are going. And you can sort of see what these big states are, where about 90 to 100 gigawatts of PV is installed, and of that, about 60 is utility scale. California cumulatively leads the way by far. It's more than a quarter of systems are installed in California, but a lot of other markets in Texas really coming out of nowhere. They were not. Their market has grown significantly in just a few years. But a lot of PV happening in a lot of places. And so why it's happening? So one is from a federal perspective, there's an investment tax credit that's in place that provides currently 26% of the cost of the system, and that's scheduled to go down over time. It's scheduled to phase out, and sort of it's a little bit complicated as far as it's based off of when a PV system starts construction, but there's sort of a creativity in what it means to start construction. So for until 2025, there's likely going to be a lot of systems getting the tax credit that's currently on the books. And then in 2026, the tax credit goes down to 10%. There's legislation that passed the House to extend this, but there hasn't been any movement to pass laws to. No law has been passed to extend that yet. Although throughout the ITC was originally passed, or the 30%. It was originally 30%. It's passed in 2006, and over the past 15 years, it's been extended several times. So there's belief that potentially it'll be extended again, but we'll have to see what happens. But a lot of the growth is happening from the state level policies. And if we just look at utility scale, a lot of that is these are renewable portfolio standards, where mandating a certain percentage of electricity sold in that state has to come from renewables. In the early years of these things have been around for 20 years. A lot of the renewable growth was being driven by these mandates. Although, really recently, because of the reduction in cost, a lot of states are a lot of the utilities are choosing solar just for purely economic reasons. But certainly, if you look at some of these states, where they're mandating, by 2040, 100% of the electricity needs to be, carbon-free sources or renewable sources. So that's obviously a lot of big impetus for deployment. But there are other reasons. Like I said, there's competitive reasons, and depending on the state, states have different prices of electricity. So solar can be competitive just by being located in a place that has high price electricity. So the Southwest is the sunniest place, but there's been a lot of growth in the Northeast of solar too, just because it's relatively expensive electricity. And there's other things. It's not just from mandates. There are lots of reasons folks are going solar. One of the things that's driving utility scale solar is corporate PPAs. So a lot of big companies, particularly tech companies, are signing long-term power purchase agreements with these big utility scale farms, and they have someone who's going to buy the electricity. So if you could see the significant amount of solar being PPAs being signed for these companies, and a lot of that causing a lot of solar deployment. Other things, community solar has been another popular policy where, a lot of, it's been sort of a pushback that, residential solar and commercial is sort of only available to people who have a roof and financing, and community solar is a sort of a shared solar, a shared solar concept.
David, can you hear me?
Oh yeah.
I'm giving you your 60-second warning.
Okay, great. Yeah.
No, that's cool. This has been cool. Just back there where you said ITC, those are investment tax credits, right?
Yes.
That's
Sorry.
tax credits. I'm sorry. All right, I missed that.
Credit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Wrap up this portion, and we'll move on to Betsy, and we'll come back to you.
Sure. Yeah. So, community solar is a policy where residential and businesses can get a piece of it. And if you look at Florida, a lot of growth had happened recently, and that's from these really big utility scale projects. So there's also just last thing, batteries are becoming more and more popular because with solar, batteries are a way of retaining the value of the electricity added to that's produced by solar. So I will. I didn't talk as fast as I should have, but that's what we got so far, and I'll turn it over.
Stop. You can turn off your screen sharing.
Sure. Let me figure out how to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
There it is. Okay.
That was fabulous. Let's give David a round of applause. Ow. Those are some big numbers, and we really appreciate your delivering them and giving us the big picture about the growth of solar. And we didn't. Our next speaker is somebody who's involved in implementing the growth of solar electricity, and that's Betsy Arlen. She's the Director of Development and Real Estate for Sun Tribe Development. That's a provider of large-scale renewable energy solutions. She manages the company's Brightfield initiatives, including advancing solar on formerly mined lands in the Nature Conservancy Cumberland Forest in Southwest Virginia. Betsy Arlen has a master's degree in geography and a bachelor's degree in geography from Wayne State University in Detroit. Betsy, the floor is yours for about 5 minutes of your initial remarks, and then we'll looking forward to hearing from you. I know that's a little short time, but we'll be back afterwards once we get the initial remarks underway. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, to the West Virginia Center for Climate Change. And David, thanks for laying some foundation on what is happening in the solar industry. Really, from those slides and what I know to be a growing industry is companies are trying to develop these projects. We're really trying to make an impact in the climate change environment. So just a little bit about what I come to the table with, a little bit about Sun Tribe Development. We're a development company who looks to develop front of the meter projects. So those projects that are on the transmission grid or on the distribution system, whether they be community solar or larger projects. We've been really focused on Virginia, and that's piggybacking off of something, David said. Virginia has a policy in place, the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which actually has been driving the solar industry growth in Virginia, that we have to have, by 2050, there are certain goals to meet that the utilities are required. So the industry is pushing hard to put solar on the ground. We, serve a wide range of groups that David also talked about. We serve the corporates, communities. We work with landowners and long-term owner-operators that are utilities. So as a development company, we're working with all of the folks that are involved in the supply chain of solar. And right now, just as Sun Tribe, we have projects under development and construction in 5 different states, and our team is collectively trying to make a positive impact on our communities. One of the, I don't know if one of the slides David was getting to, we have in Virginia approximately 180 solar companies, and those solar companies were not around, 10 years ago. So again, as the industry is growing, so are businesses and local companies. Nationally, the solar industry comprises over about 10,000 companies and around 230,000 workers, and economic investments between $30 to $50 billion. So it is a large industry that is trying to make a positive impact. Maybe just for a little bit of background on some of the projects that we're working on the abandoned mine lands and partnering with the Nature Conservancy, we are trying to diversify the energy economy, create siting that is a dual land use, land that's already been used, trying to figure out ways that we can bring solar onto the land that has infrastructure in place. And these projects for us and for the communities will bring a lot of investment and dollars into the local communities. And that's one part of the project development cycle that really can make a large impact, is the investments into communities that these solar projects can bring through tax revenue, not just reducing energy prices or providing a stable energy economy, but it's actually investments into the communities. So that's one thing that I think solar doesn't get to bring in, as we're building these power plants, we are continually investing into communities as we look for direct local investment or workforce training or creating more environmental resilience. I think as a developer on the larger utility scale side, we try to take multiple project sites and components and make them financially viable so that we can actually keep the prices down. As David was talking about, we're looking at how can we site smarter and create projects that are tied to the grid that aren't impacting other electric infrastructure, or how can we, make sure that communities are happy with how projects are being sited in development. I think that's the one big kind of, really, besides prices are going down with panels, and where we have issues that we're always fighting in development, and one is local acceptance. I think we want to make sure we're good neighbors, and a lot of times we just really need to educate. So again, want to thank the West Virginia Climate Center for really providing the opportunity to continue educating with all the information David provided, and looking forward to hearing more about Danny's work as well.
Thank you. How? I'm looking down at this thing in front of me, whereas the people online are seeing you out there. I don't know how those people do it on TV, Danny.
Smile and nod.
I'll introduce our third speaker now. Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah. Danny Chiotos, who I met in Charleston quite a few years ago when we were both a little younger. is now the Sales and Market Development Director at Mountain View Solar in Berkely Springs, West Virginia. Real homegrown operation, but with great success, I believe. He has a Bachelor's of Science in Political Science and Government from Shepherd University, also in the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia. And he's a certified building performance analyst and energy practitioner. And I believe he's lifted a few solar panels as well.
Only one at a time. Those suckers are heavy.
My wife's cousin, who's an architect, said, don't draw it until you've lifted it. And I think that's a good rule for planners in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Danny. Is your microphone on?
Can you hear me? All good? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, David, and thank you, Betsy. This is interesting. It's especially interesting to hear about the work happening in Southwest Virginia. There's only so much difference between Logan County and Wise County, from Southwest Virginia to West Virginia. So I think the work happening in Southwest Virginia gets to be a model for West Virginia. So Mountain View, we've been around for 25 years as a business. We're out of Berkely Springs in Morgan County. I live in Shepherdstown. And we've been installing solar panels for more than the past 13 years in West Virginia. We've done some of the largest installations in the state, but due to utility scale solar, the size of our installations and the size of other companies' installations are about to be dwarfed. There is a wave of utility scale solar coming in development in West Virginia. We don't know exactly when it'll be built. There's all kinds of variables, but going through the list of what's in development and in the interconnection queue to the electric grid is gigawatts upon gigawatts. A gigawatt is 1,000 megawatts, and a megawatt takes about 5 acres-ish of land. And a megawatt takes about 2,000 solar panels-ish. So if there's tens of gigawatts that's poised to be in the interconnection queue, in line to be interconnected to the electric grid, there's a lot of solar that is in line to be connected into West Virginia, absolutely dwarfing what exists now. So what is utility scale solar, and why is it in West Virginia? Utility scale solar, so I don't have the actual definition, but how I understand utility scale solar is it's the big stuff. If you're driving down a highway and you are passing a solar field and you wonder, solar field being a lot of solar panels installing in a field, and you start to wonder when it's going to end, that's a utility scale solar project. Those projects, generally the ones in West Virginia, as Betsy went through, and David went through, they could be connected to the grid and serving a lot of different customers, but generally they're being connected because solar is cheap, and it's basically the cheapest way to generate a kilowatt hour or a megawatt hour anymore. Because as David went into, there's no fuel costs. The sunlight comes down. You have a lot of upfront costs, but you look at who holds wealth in our society, and it's so concentrated up top, and folks are looking for tax breaks and makers depreciation in every tax break they can get. So solar becomes very attractive for people to have a lot of money to invest in. So large scale facilities, which are cheap, tend to bring out a lot of wealth that gets invested in them. So the tax breaks can be monetized, say what you will, but that's how these projects happen. And as a result, there are huge developments being poised for interconnection in West Virginia. There's 90 megawatts in Mingo County. There's hundreds of megawatts where I live in Jefferson County. Same in Berkeley County. You go over the Virginia line, it's not just here. It's not just because we're in West Virginia, but at its basics, it's because there's a pretty good electric grid and land is cheap. So companies who are looking to just feed renewable electricity, solar electricity into the electric grid tend to locate where land is cheap and where they can be attracted into. and the policies that have been passed in the last few years, it's interesting. The policies that have been passed in the last few years have really helped to bring out utility scale solar, the big stuff. You look at Appalachian Power and First Energy, well, AEP and First Energy, and there's subsidiaries and stuff. And they're putting out requests for proposals for companies to build 50 megawatts at a time. So 250 acres of solar at a time. And you look at what's in those RFPs and the request for proposal documents from the utilities, and it gets to be interesting. Union labor is incentivized. Building on old mine sites and brownfields and whatnot is incentivized. It doesn't have to happen there. You look at in Jefferson County and they're building on farmland, and that's just happens to be where they're building. But there's a lot of development that's happening because solar is cheap. And it's going to happen quick, and it is happening quick once those projects move forward. There's challenges to it. Supply chain issues, the tariff from the Biden administration, there's all kinds of issues that projects have to get through in order to be built. But we could be looking at an explosion of solar in West Virginia in terms of the projects that are large. And the goal there, so the large projects, the goal there generally, it can be employment, but it generally isn't employment is in the central goal. For large projects, there tends to be, this isn't always, there tends to be crews that travel the country and build these things because they build them and they're done. And the whole name of the game is cheap. But the goal is generating a lot of electricity as cheaply as possible for as long as possible. And so you build, 200 acres, 300 acres, 600 acres filled with solar. That tends to be the big direction of solar in West Virginia if you look at it per panel. If you look at other sectors, there's all kinds of other sectors that are growing. Here at Mountain View Solar, we do commercial, working with businesses, farmers, homeowners. That is growing. We're hiring people all the time. And we also work with landowners. And if anybody is out there is a landowner, as long as if you have hundreds of acres and you're near three-phase power, which is the lines with 3 wires on them that runs down the road, you might have a good site for utility scale solar. We would love to talk. I'm sure, Sun Tribe would probably love to talk. Other companies would love to talk. And one bill that's very interesting in terms of a middle ground between solar on somebody's roof, 20 panels, and a utility scale solar facility, which could be, tens of thousands of panels, is community solar. There's finally a bill that Delegates Young and Hansen are put forward this last session to legalize or allow for community solar to be built. So 15 acres of solar that can be subscribed to by renters or people who don't have a good roof for solar. And so we'll see what happens with that bill. To me, that seems like a good, solid step for progress, especially like a middle ground point between these large facilities and 20 panels on a rooftop. I guess the underlining thing that I want to get to is that utility scale solar can be problematic. It can be miscited. It can be problematic. It doesn't do a whole lot to reinvent the economy in the way that personally I would like to see. But it's necessary. It's necessary. Climate change is accelerating fast. We've burned time to be picky and choosy for how we generate our electricity and from renewable sources. We have to generate clean, renewable energy quick, and utility scale solar for raw kilowatt hours and megawatt hours, which tends to be the goal, is the way to do it.
Thank you. That was fabulous. How? So I want to turn to the questions that are coming in online. If there's anybody in the audience has written out questions, you pass them on up here and I'll get to those. Why don't we get everybody to turn their cameras on so we can have all 3 of our speakers visible, I think. Hi, Betsy. And here comes David. Hi, David. I've got a question. David, maybe you understand, I'm not sure who could speak to this, but we'll try. So I'll just throw it up and see if you can raise your hand and talk. Betsy, you're muted, and I don't know about Danny. Anyhow, a California solar manufacturer filed a complaint with the U.S. Department of Commerce claiming that Chinese solar manufacturers were bypassing tariffs by sending panels through Vietnam and other Southeast Asian countries. What is the impact of this complaint? I don't know if this is understandable to you, and where the complaint might be upheld.
Sure. Well, the last piece, I'm not sure I can, but so there's a company called Oxen Solar. They don't really produce a whole lot of panels right now. It might be a little helpful context. So first, most.
Go ahead, David. Please do explain. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and maybe you might. I have a little bit of that in my slides. Is it okay if I put the slides back up? Is that? Yeah.
Just for a second, sure.
Okay. So So like I said, Oxen is a California company. So just as a background, this is a slide of sort of where PV panels are made. You can see most of them are in China. Although other parts of Asia as well. This is a look at the price of PV panels globally and in the US. You can see it costs a lot more to buy a panel in the US than it does in most of the world. And that's a lot because there are a lot of tariffs in place on PV modules. You can see that while most of the panels in the world are built in China, the vast majority of panels we get in the U.S. come from Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia, and there were a series of tariffs put in place starting in 2012, and again in 2014, and then in 2018, and because of these tariffs, you can sort of this is U.S. module manufacturing. The tariffs were put in place starting in 2012. The U.S. PV manufacturing didn't really respond to the tariffs. There wasn't a lot built until 2018 when there were some successful measures, but there was still a lot of the industry is still located in Asia, and so this company filed a complaint that said all the tariffs are in place, are against China, but what's happening is they're starting the process of building a module in China, and then they're finishing it in other parts of Asia. There's a bunch of things that happened, and that's just one thing that's happening. That's the anti-dumping countervailing duty petition. That's accusing China of dumping panels, which means that selling them here below cost, and countervailing duty, which just means that they're providing subsidies that is making it unfair for U.S. manufacturers. There's a host of other things. There's this thing called withhold release order, which basically banned products that contain these goods from China that use forced labor, and it's very hard to prove where this piece, parts of if you sort of trace how a PV module gets built, it's built globally, so it's sort of hard to trace where every piece of it is.
David, yeah. With respect to this question, the question is, do you think that those kinds of complaints against Chinese solar manufacturers by bypassing tariffs or using questionable labor practices, are those likely to be upheld by the tariff organizations? Let's just see if we can give it a yes or no answer.
Well, unfortunately, I can't give you a yes or no. I can say that similar things have been upheld. I can tell you that it's having a really detrimental effect as far as on U.S. Solar deployment. There's 5 gigawatts and gigawatts, maybe 5-10 gigawatts of solar PV systems that potentially won't get built this year or being canceled because there's an unavailable supply of PV modules, because there's people, when they're importing panels, don't know whether they're going to be tariffed 50 to
Right.
100% on these modules or not. So it's very
I
hard
get
to
it.
get panels. As far as what the government's going to do about it, I don't think I would be in a position to say one way or another.
All right, let's ask our other panelists. Have you guys got a quick comment on that? And I'll move on to my next question, not to be cursory, but I want to try to cover it.
Answer than me, most likely.
Well, I would maybe just add that I'm not in a place to answer that either. I do know that the impact, our Solar Energy Industry Association put out a survey, and 90% of 730 companies stated the trade case causing a severe, devastating impact to business. So, to be determined what will happen, but there will be major impacts felt if it does go through. And I think that rolls all the way down to utility scale, all the way down to rooftop solar. It's an impact to the industry and our climate change goals altogether.
Danny, you want to say anything? Or
Yeah, I believe pretty strongly in securing a good and fair supply chain for solar. But like has been said, it's had a pretty detrimental impact on the solar industry, and people are scrambling for panels right
sounds
now.
like it is a big issue.
It is a big
it's not
issue,
minor.
and it's a deep one.
All right, Danny started a topic that maybe anybody can weigh in on. What's the best way for lawmakers in a state like West Virginia that has lagged behind surrounding states on utility scale solar? What's the best way that lawmakers in this state can encourage utility scale build out? Danny, you want to start with that?
Yeah, I think that's the direction they've been going in. I think that a solid renewable portfolio standard would do it. That would create what's called solar renewable energy credits in state, which don't want to burn time going into what those are, but they have real value and can help the economics of a project. So a renewable portfolio standard is a big one in state. But just honestly, I think in terms of utility scale solar, where it's already being built so cheaply and people are already making it work in the absence of state level policy is better spent on commercial and residential projects.
Let me take the next question and direct it to Betsy. What kind of impact does the availability of energy from utility scale solar have on low income people with high household energy burdens? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, as what we're trying to do as an industry is lock in, contracts for longer term solar to keep prices down, and making sure that there are opportunities through community solar, shared solar programs, that there are opportunities for low to moderate income families to purchase electricity cheaper, and find different ways to benefit communities as a whole.
All right, let me try one with David. Here's a question. How does solar electric utilities and generation bring investment in communities themselves? And examples that you can point to, how you've seen the national picture of how solar is playing out across the country. What about in terms of bringing investment to communities and helping to somewhat add diversity to their economies?
Well, I mean, property taxes is I think where revenue comes in, and obviously, there's some level of operation and maintenance necessary as well. And ideally, if you have an economy it's not just one project and done, then you can sort of build up a whole supply chain there, where you have skilled laborers and other things that you're working on. So that would be sort of.
But you're talking about the actual property taxes on the facility itself.
That's right. Yeah,
is a source of income.
Yeah,
I see. Here's another question. The question is for Virginia. Betsy, in Virginia, was there a particular government administration that enacted this clean energy plan?
So the clean energy, the Virginia Clean Economy Act was voted on. It was bipartisan that voted on this legislation being passed. So there were both sides of government coming together to pass this bill. It was in 2020, so it was under Governor Northam, but we did have both sides voting to pass this act.
Let me try this one on Dan. It says in the Ohio Valley, which is supposedly we only have an average of 50 to 60 days a year of sun, because that's what this person is contending. Is it viable to install solar under these circumstances?
Yes.
All right, that answers that question. Better call Dan up and see who he recommends.
Germany was the leading solar global solar place, and that's like Alaska.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, if you look at where solar is being installed, especially in the past couple of years, I looked at it a couple of weeks back, and it's more solars in terms of like household stuff, not utility scale stuff. More homes in Appalachian Power's territory, central, southern West Virginia, are being installed than anywhere else in the state. So yeah, and the Appalachian Power territory has basically the same solar irradiance or sun hours as the Ohio Valley.
Another question, are solar fields, solar panel installations animal friendly?
I'll maybe add to, a lot of our projects that we're incorporating are have wildlife corridors, and there's wildlife fencing, which are important components to bring in. So making sure that there are paths for wildlife to move, or for smaller animals to get through. So there's ways to design systems so that they are wildlife friendly. There's also a whole nother industry popping up with solar grazing. So bringing in for operations and maintenance, sheep into the mix to help maintain solar fields. So the industry as a whole is looking for creative ways to make sure that we're not impacting the land that we are using, and we're not impacting it in a great way.
David, let me ask you to speak to that just a little bit, because I see you nodding your head. I wouldn't be surprised to learn that this is a concern every place where you have these large scale installations. How do you think it's played out on a national basis?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a right way of doing things, and there's I don't want to say a wrong way, but there's priorities, and encouraging things for like on brownfields, obviously has a less of an environmental impact. Bringing the right smart environmental permitting things into play, and proactively working with communities. When you talked about what can states do, I mean, I think obviously the RPS, but also things like smart permitting and interconnection standards, and to the point of doing it right and doing wrong. Obviously it's cheap. Everything's cheaper if you don't have to follow regulations or things like that. But you can still do things affordably, and so there have been good parts parts of the U.S. that are doing it better than others, and obviously some places there's more of a concern than others. There are more things they have to consider. So,
Dan, I'll ask Betsy. Your company would probably know something about this. What's being done about the education and training of installers and maintenance? I mean, Danny said that there are crews that travel and do a lot of the basic installation, but surely there are initiatives to try to train people to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. I can speak to Virginia and a program, the SHINE program in Virginia, which is a kind of a program that partners with community colleges to get installers NABCEP certified, and to make sure that they have opportunities in the field to find employment and to work on installing. One of the really kind of exciting parts of the Nature Conservancy portfolio that we're working on is finding ways to provide workforce training with SHINE programs, again, partnering with local community colleges, making sure that there is a trained workforce for that when we do have local projects where, you know, in state, there's a pool of workers that can supply. Really would be interested to hear what Danny has to say about that as well.
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to bring up SHINE. SHINE is a great program. Building off of that, at Mountain View, we have a partnership with Mountaineer Behavioral Health out of Martinsburg, a substance abuse clinic. And for folks coming out of there, we'll connect them with a job at Mountain View Solar is one way. Another way is we'll speak at community colleges, and we're hoping that we can start a program with a community and technical college that can be a solar training program. But at the end of the day, solar is not that hard. It's a short training program to get into solar installation work. Folks who've been in mines or on mines in so many cases are basically electricians. Very familiar with DC, which is, as David spoke to, a lot of solar work, DC electricity.
All right, go ahead.
So there's a quick training program to get into solar, and it's not hard to set up.
All right, I'm going to let you each have a minute to wrap up after I ask one more question, because and I'm going to return to the where we started out in the rather arcane subject, but as we said, a very important subject of tariffs and the origin of solar panels. Because what we heard from the speakers, I believe I summarize it, is that this is a big deal. And there's an uncertainty out there in this industry, in this world of solar power, both residential, individual solar installations, and utility scale solar. There are implications from various pending challenges that are slowing down the importation, or have the potential to slow down the importation of solar panels right now and really cramp the style of this expanding industry. So the question is from the same person who asked the first question, and I'll just ask you to pick one. The question is, will the Department of Commerce investigation have a greater impact on utility scale solar or on rooftop solar?
I think utility scale solar, because it's so dependent on getting costs down. There's a little bit more flexibility and wiggle room to mix and match panels in rooftops, residential solar.
Betsy, your answer. I'm sure this questioner wants to hear from all three of you.
Yeah, no, definitely going to impact, I think, what it comes down to is utility scale solar the most. The customers, the local governments, the landowners, the construction workers, the engineering consulting firms, professional service firms. There's just a trickle down from it. I think we want, and as an industry, want to see panels manufactured locally, and we want to see incentives to do that. We just need to make sure that we have projects moving forward that can support that as well.
Thank you. David, utility, which will it have more impact on, utility scale or rooftop?
Yeah, utility scale. There's the module manufacturing that's already in the U.S. A lot of that is for distributed. And there's just utility scale is a bigger market, it's gonna everyone's.
All right. Well, we've got a consensus. Our questioner got their question answered. All right. We have 3 minutes left in our program, and we so appreciate people joining us for these programs, and we like to think that they want us to go on forever. But really, it's been super fun to appear and have everybody here in our great live audience. Let's give our live audience a hand. All you people out there on the internet, give the live audience a hand, showed up. And remember, we have our program on July 27th called Blues the New Green. Labor unions confront the climate crisis. We'll have some great speakers from the Blue Green Alliance talking about the very question of how organized labor is helping to create climate solutions. I'll start us off with David Feldman, who spoke, and then we'll get Betsy, and then we'll have Danny, and then we'll wrap it up. David Feldman, it's on.
Sure.
You get a minute. Say
Just final
goodbye.
thoughts? Yeah, sure. The only thing I'd say, I'll maybe won't even take it, just one more slide. And if you just, this is a look, if you look at the left, this is a look at, how much solar is projected to be built. And under a bunch of scenarios. One, the most aggressive is if we can really tackle climate change. And if you see where we are now and you see where we're going, there's been so much solar that's been deployed in the past 10 years, and it's still that little bar. And so if you just imagine how much more has the potential is likely to be built in over the next 10, 15, 20 years. And I really think there's an opportunity for all over the US, including West Virginia, to really be a part of that and to really get a lot of that investment. So
Thank you. Betsy.
Yeah, I would just maybe add to that it's going to take a lot of innovation and a lot of collaboration to make sure that we are working together to hit all of our climate goals. It's going to be a mix of utility scale solar, a mix of rooftop. We're just really going to have to find ways to make the impact. And thanks for having me.
Thank you. Danny.
Cool. Thank you for having me as well. Yeah, we need to build out solar. We need to do it on our rooftops, on our homes. We need to do it on our businesses, on our farms, and we need to do it on old surface mines and mountaintop removal sites, in brownfields with utility scale solar. There's potential here. There's a ton that may happen in state that's poised to be interconnected on the PJM interconnection queue, but most of the folks don't have $50 million to invest in solar. So give us a call or look up your local solar company. We're in Berkely Springs. We do businesses statewide and help with farmers statewide, and we work with folks residentially in the Eastern Panhandle. So whoever your local solar installer is, give them a call. There's a lot of options out there. You can take care of your own footprint. We're happy to help, and we're excited for the future.
Thank you very much to our speakers one more time. Thanks to everybody in our online audience and our in-person audience. And we'll see you all on July 27th. Thank you.